Hi everyone, welcome back to another weekend reflection video. Today's gonna be a little bit different as I have my daughter crawling around my feet in the living room and stuff. So if she starts making noises, I do apologise throughout this video if you hear it. But she's in her own world, she's having fun. So today I'm actually gonna be talking about a quote from a very famous Russian literature writer called Leo Tolstoy. Very famous for writing War and Peace, The Resurrection. Very articulate, very philosophical man in my opinion. And I really like this quote that he said. And the quote goes something like this: everyone seeks to change the world, but refuses to change themselves first. Now, it sounds easier to understand than what it actually is. Now, fundamentally, it took me a little while to really understand what this meant. It sort of comes into two parts. The first one is that, which is quite straightforward, we seem to seek external validation and external solutions to internal problems. That's what we're fundamentally getting at. But it can also extend to the level of people adopt, big external problems, like usually societal problems, whether that's an economic problem or whether it's an environment problem, and they sort of take that as their sort of flagship, as their sort of purpose in life. But that's a very complex issue, the environment, the economic, it's very, very complex to deal with. There's a very big array of problems that need to be sort of looked at and talked about and solved. If you can't even get your house in order, you can't even get your bedroom in order, you can't even get your wardrobe in order, how could you possibly think you could solve such a complex issue as that? That's what we're fundamentally getting at. And I think that's quite accurate to what that quote is talking about. So if you talk about, let's say you've got a lack of self-respect, it doesn't have to be that sort of extreme. It can also be small. There's all different arrays of situations this could relate to. Let's say you have a lack of self-respect, a lack of self-love. And one of the instances is where you're part of a group and you're sort of the donkey of the group. You're the laughing stock. They're the ones that you always give money to them, and they don't really respect you, but they have you around because you're sort of, like you say, someone they can have like a guinea pig. They're sort of the sort of maybe even punching bag. Maybe not exactly, that might be quite extreme, but you get what I'm getting at. You're not respected, but you want to feel respected. You want to be part of this group because they want to be around you as a person, but fundamentally they're only there for this, but you get some form of temporary validation. So you do what? You carry on doing it. And then that's how addiction happens as well. It's the same line as that. You have a problem internally, so you start drinking, you start doing this, you start getting addiction because it gives a temporary solution, but then you just wake up and the problem's still there. So fundamentally what we're getting at is that you need to look within yourself. A great example is relationship problems. Fundamentally, although relationships are quite a complex issue, generally speaking, you do not have a relationship problem. You do not have a business problem. You do not have a friendship, a family. You have a you problem. You have an internal problem that you need to solve. Now, it doesn't mean that, obviously like in relationships, if let's say you're not being intimate enough, for example, that's quite probably the most common one in this modern day and age, then it's something that you need to look at within yourself. Now, there is going to be external factors then. Maybe the other person's not interested anymore. Maybe it's because of this, but they might not be interested because of something that's internal to yourself. Now, obviously, they have to have a level of internal responsibility as well, but you can only look at yourself. That's the most important. And we're not saying that the external is not important. That's not the key point we're getting here. We're saying prioritize, fix yourself first before going out the external. Because you need to have yourself in order, because the external world is chaos, it's chaotic. And you need to make sure that you're strong and secure within yourself to tackle those big issues. Otherwise, you're going to crumble and fall. And that's fundamentally what we're getting at. But I've always been a big believer that you do not have a relationship problem. You do not have a friendship problem, a business problem, a career problem. You have a you problem that you need to solve. Now, I think the reason why it's easy, like we're almost tuned to look at the external factors, is because fundamentally, when you tune it to start looking within, you then have to go along lines that it's your fault and there's no one else's fault as to why this has happened. And your brain doesn't want to do that. Your brain wants to be comfortable. It wants to think it's someone else's fault. So I don't have to look within myself. I don't have to admit that I was wrong and feel that sort of strong feeling of, damn, so I made a mistake. And things like that. And again, picking all the wipes out. So anyway, what was I saying? So yeah, it's your mind doesn't want to look within yourself because it's uncomfortable. No one wants to do it. But once you start sort of training your mind to do that, it stops becoming uncomfortable. And actually it starts becoming enjoyable, because you, for the first time in your life, if you ask someone, and I'm not trying to like hit people who do this, some people, it's just natural. And, if you start to do the internal validation and you start looking within yourself to the problems in your life, you start realizing that there's hope. You start realizing there's things that you can do to solve these issues, because fundamentally you want to solve them, but you're looking at external solutions, external responsibilities, external validations, whatever you want to call it. And, and that could be in the form of blaming someone else. It's, the reason why I didn't get promoted is because that manager prioritizes that person because it's their friend or whatever. It's something that you can't control. Whereas maybe you should look at it as, I didn't get promoted because they've done something that I maybe should have done. And I'm just getting all these wipes out again. I've got to maybe hold it somewhere else. And you start changing the way that you do things. You start thinking about things. So, it's fundamentally what we're getting at is that you need to look within yourself in all regards. If you didn't get that promotion, why didn't I get it? What could I have done wrong? Ask your manager, is there something that I could have done differently this time? Is there something what that person did? There might be times where that, tyrannical, that corruptive state of they're actually hiring it because, they're not actually the best at doing it for this reason might actually take case. There are cases where that's true. But even still, you don't let yourself get to that because all you're going to do is play the victim. And there's going to be times where you won't actually fit for the role and you're not going to learn from it. You're just going to play the victim again and you're not going to get anywhere in life. And that's a fundamental truth. So even if that does happen, if you have that strength within, you can then challenge that. You can then sit there and go, I don't think this is fair. But you do it from a perspective of, I want to learn. Maybe I'm wrong because you are wrong a lot of the time. I'm flipping wrong a lot of the time. Some people, that's hard to hear that they're wrong. Okay, but fundamentally, if you look internally, you're going to do very, very well for yourself because you don't become angry. You find yourself that you can control the outcomes of things. There's a saying that 90% of what happens to you is out of your control, but the 10% dictates the outcome. And I'm a huge believer of that as well. If you act angrily, then it's going to be an angry outcome. If you act sort of like, no, yeah, this is a crap situation, but I'm going to do the best I can, people are then going to start doing the best they can. It's people have far more power and control than they actually believe, but they think it comes from external factors. And I think that's due to how, especially society's run nowadays with all, with all Instagram and all this other stuff, looking at external things where it's all about the internal that's the most important. So I challenge you guys, for anyone who's guilty of that, be honest with yourself. That's the first step to looking at yourself internally, is admit that you do look externally, and maybe it's the time to start looking internally and have that hope. That's the biggest thing for me, is that there is hope that you can actually change what's happening in your life. When you look externally, it's someone else's, you can't change that. That's fundamentally what we're getting at. But that's going to be the end of the video, guys. I hope you have enjoyed it. Hopefully I've explained that very well. It's a bit difficult with my daughter tearing up yellow pieces of paper right next to me in a minute. So I do apologise if you heard anything, but I hope you have enjoyed it. And I'll see you in the next one, whenever that is. Take care. Bye-bye.